All right, my name is Zachary Martinez, and I made an appointment booking app. The technology I used is Spring Boot for the backend, React.js for the front end, MySQL for the database, and Axios and Maven were some additional technologies that I used. Postman for API testing. Um, Spring Boot is what I use for the backend. It's not a UI library, it's a framework which acts as the structure and backbone of the application. You can pass libraries into the framework, and we'll talk about that more on the next slide. But Spring Boot itself is not a UI library. There's four main components that I used in making this app: models, REST controller, repository, and exception handling. Models represent the entity or the table in your database and can often be thought of as nouns. For example, users, appointments, students, cars. They're the objects of that you create in the app. The next one is REST controllers. Controllers is how you handle the requests in your API, how you want them to handle incoming and outgoing CRUD applications, HTTP requests. And it's where you want the majority of your code to be contained. You don't want it to be in your repository. You want your repository to be very clean and have the least amount of code as possible because it's the closest part of your database, the closest part to your database. It's what's communicating with your app itself. Um, you want the repository itself to just perform the basic CRUD actions, and then your REST controller to um, control how all of the things are being interacted with. The final one is exception handling. Exception handling, the reason you use that is to prevent generic errors like 500, which we'll talk about later on. Um, it's to pinpoint specific errors that are happening in the application. Um, let's see, Maven. This was the first major error I came across in the project. Maven is a build automation and project management tool. It allows me to import dependencies from an external library that are needed for Spring Boot to run properly. As you can see over here, I accidentally, when I was trying to build the app and I was following the Udemy course, I accidentally started Spring Boot with Gradle instead of Maven, and I didn't fully understand what Maven or Gradle were, and so I didn't realize the mistake. It took me solid 2 hours of trying to import things and figuring out why Jakarta was the new update that they did. I think previously it was I think it was Java X. Yeah, Java X right here. And I was searching forever online to try to figure out what the mistake was. Went back, rewatched the video. Turns out I accidentally used Gradle instead of Maven, and it fixed the whole issue. But Maven automates the process so I don't have to manually download all the dependencies that I need. All this information is stored in the POM, which is an XML file that defines the project's structure and configuration. Moving on to the front end. Going into the project, I knew what I wanted to use for my backend, and I knew what I wanted to use for my database, but I wasn't certain on what I wanted to use for the front end because I also didn't know anything about these applications. But after doing some research on Angular and React, I found out that Angular is a fully fledged framework that tends to be very structured and follow a complex architecture. Angular has a steeper learning curve, but also works better for large-scale applications that need a lot of structure. Some examples are Gmail, PayPal, Microsoft builds a lot of apps with Angular, same with MasterCard. A lot of banks use Angular because it's a very structured system. And it actually, the differences in the two can be represented in the logos. Angular is a shield, which is structured, and React is like an atom with atoms bouncing around stuff all over the place. React is a JavaScript library used to create UIs. React is fast moving, highly reusable, and flexible. It's considered easier to learn and is a better fit for applications of all sizes. Instagram, Netflix, Uber, and Facebook are all good examples of apps that were built using React. That's what drew me to React, is it was obviously the steeper learning curve. I knew that this was going to be a shorter project and wasn't going to require a lot of complex structure. It wasn't really necessary, so I just decided to go with React. Axios. So Axios was, obviously I didn't know what that is either. It's the bridge. Axios is a JavaScript library within React that makes it easy to communicate with my REST API. You could almost think of it as the API for the front end. It's what's sending the HTTP requests back to the back end application, to the API, all the GET, put requests and things like that. Axios is used to perform CRUD operations by sending the HTTP requests from the front end to my backend API. Axios automatically returns the response in JSON and doesn't have to be converted first, so it's very convenient. We can see over here in the code where axios.get, you send it to the location of the backend backend application. Same with this .delete request. Just communicating, sending the HTTP request to the API so that the backend application can actually process everything. The database I decided to go with was MySQL. I was familiar with SQL coming into this class. I took a SQL class before, and I like SQL, and it made sense for the app that I was building. SQL databases are table-based and use relational data structures. SQL sends queries to insert, delete, and update records. I'm familiar with SQL, as I said, and the table format is perfect for holding appointment data. NoSQL just seemed very unnecessary for an app where I'm just booking appointments. It's very basic table format was perfect. So I decided to stick with SQL. I used Postman for API testing. I used Postman to test the API while it's in production, send HTTP requests, and the main thing is to ensure that the database was being updated anytime I would change code, especially early on when I was creating the backend. I wanted to make sure that the code I was implementing wasn't breaking the system and I was still able to update the database. And that's the main reason I was using Postman while I was building out the application, using JSON. And the final error, which is actually still unresolved, I spent a solid 3 days trying to figure this out. But the relationship between the user entity and the appointment entity is still broken. And I have listed time constraint was probably the biggest reason why I just didn't have enough time to fix it. I have a specific issue calling user into appointment. It's actually displayed in this line of code. I'll explain in a second. The broad 500 error message, which I was talking about earlier, on the front end application, it just shows the broad 500 error, and that's just showing the 500 error message is a very broad thing saying that something anywhere in the backend application is broken. I know where it's broken, but that's why you have exception handling to pinpoint exact locations and to show whenever something doesn't go right in the code, you can have an exception for it. But currently, the way the application is set up, all of the appointment information is hard coded. It's not actually implemented because as I said, the relationship between the user entity and appointment entity is broken. So the foreign key won't work. Let's go to sources. The sources I had were Udemy course, Spring Boot course, and Bootstrap, and the links are in the hyperlink right here. Bootstrap was so that I could, it helped me build out the front end application, provide a structure within React to build everything, because obviously I had no idea how to code in JavaScript. I had no idea how to use React, so Bootstrap was very useful. And now it's time for the demonstration. So I already have it. Okay, now to test out the app. you must create a user before you can book an appointment. So let's go to add user. Let's just put Zachary Martinez. Username. Let's just put something simple, Zach. Email. Let's go with this email right here. Hit submit. And just to show that the cancel button does work, if we go right here, hit cancel, that cancels as well. Another feature that I added is no matter where you are on the website, if you go here to Stork Central in the top right hand corner, it'll take you back to the home page. So now the user that I just created down here, let's go to let's look at the database real quick, just to show that it is updating the database. Okay, it just got added right there. I can edit. Let's go Zachary Martinez. Let's go Zach username. Just do updated at email.com. Hit submit, and then we can go back to database, and everything's been updated. And then we can finally delete it. Just hit delete, and then go back to the database one last time, just confirm it has been deleted from the database. So now once you've created a user, you go in and you hit select, and this is where you would book an appointment. You would hit the book appointment button, and it does actually take you to, I created everything on the front end is done. It's broken on the back end, so if I went in, entered everything and hit submit, I don't want to do it right now. It would break the application. Cancel does take you back though to the home screen. Select, and then ideally this would display the appointments for the user, display your information and your appointment time, start time, your ID. If we go to the table for appointment, user ID is the foreign key that links the appointment to the user, because user has an appointment. That's the relationship. Back to home button works. If I do go back into it, all of these buttons work. Edit, it populates everything. I just can't actually enter any information right now, and that's because in the backend application, just to explain a few things, I had, for example, a generated value, generate type identity, so that it can be reused in the, so that the foreign key could be reused in the appointments list in the database. Right here is where my code is breaking. Trying to assign the relationship on the back end. I haven't had time to work it out. Mapped by user. So cascade type all deletes appointment when I delete user. And that's another part of the goal, is because they're assigned together. Whenever you delete the user, you want all of the appointments that are associated with that user to also be deleted. The code is here to do it, but because they're not actually linked, it breaks the application. So now to just give a quick run through of all of my code. I already showed the user class. In the appointment class, I just have, for the attributes, I have appointment ID, start time, end time, and date. And then on this side is where we have the user and appointment is a many-to-one, or I'm sorry, one-to-many relationship. For every one user can have multiple appointments, but an appointment is not going to have multiple users because it's for a set time period. And this is where we assign it here. This is the many side of the many-to-one relationship. We have fetch type.lazy right here, and this is just so that when we load the relationship, we load the relationship, but not the entire object, and this saves memory and performance. Um, I just wrote some extra code in here. I just have my getters and setters. If we go to the user controller and appointment controller pretty much have the same code. So we'll just start with user controller. Right here we pass in REST controller. That's what defines this class as the controller. I can see in the comments here I put that it's REST controller combined with controller. Controller combined with response body. So it's getting the response body. Cross origin. And here's where we put the link to the server. Cross origin allows a web page to access resources from a different domain than the one that is served on the page. If we go further down, AutoWired is what allows Maven to automatically import the required beans, which is the dependencies, into the class, instead of having to manually go in and add dependencies every single time. Just a basic thing. Here we have post mapping. Post mapping is the function that sends the post request to create and update the server. Get mapping is what sends the get request. Let's just continue down. Get mapping. So get mapping, this gets a list of users. So this displays the list in this bracket of the app. The lists all of the different users that we have. If we go to get mapping, this gets a specific user, and that's why we have the slash, because if I go to, let's go back to the app. If I hit select, which is the view of the CRUD function, create read, it's the read option. We're going to see, we can see localhost 3000. That's the server, the local server that I called in up here. Localhost 3000. And then so this one gets a list of all the users. This one gets a specific user by their ID, because that's the primary key. Back up here, we can see that it's view user slash the ID, and that's exactly where it comes from in this line of code right here. Put mapping. This is the exact same thing, except in the edit option. Whenever you hit the edit button, it's going to allow you to edit a specific user at the location of it's looked up from the primary key, which is their ID number. Delete mapping, same exact thing. You're deleting a specific user, not all of the users. It's essentially the same thing in the appointment controller. User not found. These two are my exception handling. It's just throwing the exception that if I put in the app an ability to search up a specific user, it would throw the error code could not find user with ID and then display the ID that you put in. I don't have that right now, but it's building it out for future use. That's pretty much everything in the back end. If we move on to the front end, this is React. We'll start with the home. Home is the home screen that whenever the app first loads up, the website first loads up. We import React, we import Axios, which we already talked about in the PowerPoint. Export default function. So I already talked about all this. This is the Axios is the I think about it as the API of the front end. It's what's sending the HTTP requests to this address in order to get those functions that we talked about. The structure of React is very similar to, it reminds me of HTML. You have all of these, I don't exactly know what you would call them, but you create tables and structures very similar to HTML. This line just displays the create user. Let's go back. You must create a user before you book an appointment. It's just a plain text panel. Go down here. This is all displaying the, just the ID number, name, username, email, and then the action bar. And the action bar is where we have all of the buttons and the functions. So right here, link. The select button is sending you to the specific address view user / user ID. And this is a part of React Router DOM. If we go to app, this is where all of the buttons exact paths are routed. So right here we see / element home. It sends you to the home class. Everything that I have in the home class, it sends you back to that. This one / add user sends you to the add user class that I have set up, and so forth. That's what everything does. So whenever you click a button, it's sending you to that exact location. Let's go back. That's everything that's pretty much in the ad. The nav bar. The nav bar is the bar that's at the very top, and that's how I made Stork Central essentially work as a button. It's a link. So whenever you, like I said, if you go here and you hit Stork Central, it'll take you back to the home screen. That's because I made it a link right here. Just put /, and if we go to app, / is assigned as sending you back home to the home page. The rest of the nav bar, we have the add user button. It's the exact same concept. It's just a button. It's a link that sends you to that specific location that we have assigned in the app. And that's pretty much everything. There's not too much. Everything works the exact same in View User. It's the same setup. You have Axios at the top, which is sending the HTTP requests, and then you build out down here and under return, the return of the function, you build out all of the what you see visually on the GUI. You can think of it as the user interface. That's the proper word. And that's everything. Thank you for watching.